Jon Snow dies in the new Game of Thrones sequel. Good day, Westeros throne family. Imagine this. You wake up, check your feed, sip your drink, and then BM. News drops that Jon Snow, the man who survived White Walkers, wildlings, betrayal, exile, family drama, and Daenerys Targaryen's entire personality arc, has finally died in the upcoming sequel. Yes, you heard that correctly. The man with more plot armor than a dragon has allegedly reached his final chapter. And if that did not punch you in the soul, I do not know what will. Before we dig into this snowy avalanche of chaos, make sure you subscribe to Westeros Throne and click the notification bell so you never miss any updates from the realm. Trust me, if news like this keeps dropping, you're going to need every raven you can get. Now, let us march through this story the way Jon marched through every life or death scenario, determined, slightly confused, and emotionally unprepared. The rumor that Jon Snow dies in the sequel hit the fandom like a rogue giant smashing through the gates. Most fans thought the sequel was going to be a redemption tour, Jon wandering beyond the wall, reconnecting with Ghost, maybe discovering a new threat or building a new society. Instead, the whispers say his storyline ends with a death that is supposedly meaningful, poetic, and true to his character. Which, if we are honest, could mean anything. This is the same universe that thinks true to character, includes weddings that end in massacres and kings who last shorter than a Dornish vacation. But here is the interesting part. The rumor does not describe how he dies. No exact cause, no specific battle, no dramatic confrontation laid out. Just the outcome. And that mystery cracks open an entire vault of speculation. When a character's fate is final but the path is hidden, the audience starts filling in the blanks. And when it comes to Jon Snow, those blanks are enormous. Some believe Jon sacrifices himself for a new threat from the far north. That seems predictable, but in a noble, Tolkien-esque way. Others think he dies defending the free folk from an internal conflict, proving once again that he is basically their unpaid, overworked therapist. Then there are the bold takes claiming his final act has nothing to do with battle at all. Maybe an illness, a betrayal, or some long-lasting consequence of past events finally catching up with him. In Westeros, death is not always a sword to the chest. Sometimes, it is your past knocking at the door. Now, let us talk about the fan reaction because, wow, the internet went ballistic. Half the fandom fell into despair, acting like their emotional support Stark just got taken from them. The other half said, well, at least this time he'll not come back, right? And then there is the tiny, mysterious third group who have been waiting for Jon to have a permanent ending for years. You know, the same people who think Bran being king was perfectly fine. These are the true wild cards of the fandom. The bigger question is why the writers would choose to end Jon Snow's story like this. From a storytelling standpoint, actually makes sense. Jon is a character defined by sacrifice. Every major choice he made, from joining the Night's Watch to fighting the Night King to killing Daenerys, came with heavy moral cost. A story about a man like that rarely ends in peaceful retirement. He is not the kind of character who settles down, opens a bakery, and starts naming sourdough loaves after fallen comrades. Jon Snow has always been framed as a tragic figure, even when he was living, breathing, and attempting to brood his way through life. It is also worth considering the sequel's timeline. Because if this sequel is set only a few years after the main show, Jon would still be fairly young. His death at that stage shifts the tone from nostalgic continuation to bold reinvention. Instead of clinging to familiar faces, the creators may be using Jon's fate to signal a new era. Killing the central character early is risky, shocking, and dramatic, 3 words that describe nearly every major moment in the franchise. Something else fans have been whispering about is Jon's legacy. If he dies in the sequel, it forces every remaining character to reckon with what he stood for. Jon Snow was never a ruler, but he inspired loyalty like few others. His death would echo through every corner of the story, pushing characters into new arcs of grief, revenge, leadership, or transformation. In other words, his ending becomes a catalyst for everything that comes next. A lot of viewers are wondering whether this rumored death is legitimate storytelling or an attention-grabbing twist. But the truth is, Jon's character arc already has a sense of finality. By the end of the original series, he had given up every title, every claim, every burden. His life beyond the wall was the closest thing he ever got to peace. Ending his story there, far from thrones, politics, and flaming dragons, could feel strangely fitting. Bittersweet, but fitting. Of course, if the rumor is false, that opens a whole different conversation. Because if Jon Snow is alive in the sequel, then every theory here gets flipped upside down like a Lannister at a family reunion. Fans can expect slow-burning character development, conflicts with the Free Folk, new mysteries beyond the wall, or even new supernatural threats. Jon's survival means longevity, and longevity means storylines that stretch far into new territory. But assuming the death rumor is true, the writers will need to justify it. Jon is not the kind of character you can remove casually. If his life ends, it has to feel earned. Audiences will expect that his final act reflects the themes of duty, honor, and identity that shaped his entire journey. Whether he falls protecting others or confronting a personal demon, his death must resonate. Let us not ignore the production side either. Reports say Kit Harington himself was involved in shaping the sequel's tone. If this rumor is accurate, it might even be his idea. After all, actors sometimes want closure for their characters. And for someone who played Jon for nearly a decade, Harington may want a final note that is powerful, dramatic, and conclusive. The sequel is also positioned as a more personal story, with fewer houses, fewer kingdoms, and fewer political threads. In that setting, Jon's death becomes even more significant. Without the distraction of Westerosi politics, the story can focus entirely on emotional stakes. A smaller narrative space magnifies every loss, every revelation, every sacrifice. It is not about who sits on the throne. It is about who stands at the edge of the world and what their life really meant. And that brings us to the central question fans keep debating. Does Jon Snow deserve a peaceful ending, or does he deserve a meaningful one? Those two answers are not always the same. Jon spent his entire life being pulled by. No matter how the sequel handles it, one thing is clear. Jon Snow remains one of the most influential characters in the entire series. His choices have shaped kingdoms, alliances, wars, and destinies. His death, if it truly happens, does not diminish his role. It enhances it. This rumor may or may not be true, but it has already reignited interest in the sequel, the franchise, and the character himself. It has driven fans back into lore deep dives, rewatches, debates, and theory building. And in that sense, Jon Snow is still doing what he has always done, bringing people together, even when fate is pulling him apart. Thank you for watching.